Okay, we'll get this. We'll figure it out. We'll have some, like all new rituals, it will become old hat soon enough. So I am sitting on the other side of the hall than where Hojo-san sits, which is the way it works. But that means that the side of the hall that's to the left of the Buddha feels really far away, and people are really, it just, if you want to get more sort of close in, if you want to rearrange yourselves so that you feel comfortable and you can see. And if I never seem to be looking your way, that is not my intention. And if you're listening online, hello, folks listening online. So here we are. So Hojo-san and Joichi are in LA right now at Zenshuji, getting prepped for the big Jukai ceremony that they're doing there. Is that next weekend? When is that? Yeah, next week. Big ceremony. So one thing that you may not fully kind of absorb, because it's not something Hojo-san really promotes about himself, but he's kind of a genius about ritual. Have you noticed that rituals here can be pretty magical? If you were here for Osegaki, for instance, that's not always the norm at Soto-Zen temples or zendos in this country. So Buddha-ai is a place where there's some Dharma magic that happens, if I can say that. And that's actually a little bit to the point of what I want to talk about today. Really what I want to talk about today is love. But in order to do so, I need to read a very old poem and tell a very old story and beat around the bush a bit. Not very direct. I'm not perhaps being a very good Zen student. In Zen, we tend to privilege the idea of directness, right? Direct, right? Bodhidharma, our 5th century ancestor, the person who brought Zen from India to China, is famous for having said, whether he said this or not, is famous for having said that the transmission at the heart of Zen is a transmission beyond the scriptures, that it's a direct pointing to the mind. And directness, right? Directness is sort of core to the spirit, the ethos, the vitality, the vigor, the vividness of our tradition. And so I may not seem very direct today, but I hope by the end of our time together today, my not so direct way of approaching things will maybe reveal a way in which directness is not perhaps what we think it is. That directness may look like something that walks around, that circumambulates. Try saying circumambulation 10 times fast. It's just a big old word that means walking around, circumambulating. So here's the very old poem. Our Chinese Zen ancestor, Shito, in Japanese, we call his name Sekito Kisen, 8th century, wrote these words. This is a translation by Taigen Leighton and Katsuhashi. The Grass Roof Hermitage, very, very famous poem. It's a poem that's actually a beautiful little book about this poem by Ben Connolly, a really good kind of Dharma book about this poem. And this poem, the central image is of a grass roof hermitage. A hermitage, a place where you would live alone, and a grass roof. This is not a permanent dwelling place. I mean, the roof is made of grass. It's not the greatest way to make a roof if you want it to last for, a good 20 years like roofs are supposed to last. The image of the hermitage is really an image of the human life, the self, us, each of us. So here's how it goes in English. I've built a grass hut where there's nothing of value. After eating, I relax and enjoy a nap. When it was completed, fresh weeds appeared. Now it's been lived in, covered by weeds. The person in the hut lives here calmly, not stuck to inside, outside, or in between, places worldly people live. He doesn't live. Realms worldly people love. He doesn't love. Though the hut is small, it includes the entire world. In 10 feet square, 10 by 10, like Hojo-san's Hojo. In 10 feet square, an old man illumines forms in their nature. A great vehicle bodhisattva trusts without doubt. The middling or lowly cannot help wondering, will this hut perish or not? Will this hut perish or not? Perishable or not, the original master is present, not dwelling north or south, east or west, firmly based on steadiness. It can't be surpassed. A shining window below the green pines, jade palaces or vermilion towers can't compare with it. Just sitting with head covered, all things are at rest. Thus, this mountain monk doesn't understand at all. Living here, he no longer works to get free. Who would proudly arrange seats trying to entice guests? Turn around the light to shine within. Turn around the light to shine within. Then just return. The vast, inconceivable source can't be faced or turned away from. Meet the ancestral teachers. Be familiar with their instruction. Bind grasses to build a hut, and don't give up. Let go of hundreds of years and relax completely. Open your hands and walk innocent. Thousands of words, myriad interpretations are only to free you from obstructions. If you want to know the undying person in the hut, don't separate from the skin bag here and now. If you want to know the thing that lasts forever, don't separate from this temporary grass roof hermitage that is your life. Just turn around the light and shine within. Then just return. This image of the grass roof hermitage that is all of us carries in it the line that becomes really famous in our tradition. It's a line that our ancestor Dogen in the 13th century built into his instructions about Zazen, where he says, turn around take the backward step that turns the light and shines it inward. I'm misquoting that. Anyone? That sounds right. We used to chant this. Take the backward step that turns the light and shines it in. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Very good. Right? An image of what it is to settle into this present moment. Right? To just be here. So that's an image of us in this grass roof hut that is so temporary. That's an image of what it is to not separate from this life here and now. That's an image of life in all of its vitality. That's Zen directness, taking the backward step. We often imagine, though, that taking the backward step is this kind of directness that, like, I'm just going to be really here, really present. I'm just going to smell the incense without thinking about the incense. I'm just going to taste my food without thinking about my food. I'm just bare experience. Strip it all away. Be sheerly, directly present. Now, I'm saying that with like a sardonic tone in my voice. I mean, that is part of what we practice. But then there's this thing, circumambulating. What if directness isn't about a straight line? What if it isn't about some kind of stripping away all the stuff of our lives? I want to say today that the way of the bodhisattva is about whatever it is to walk in circles. And the reason I want to say this is partly because I experienced my life to be very much about walking in circles, not knowing if I'm really getting anywhere. But also because I want to urge all of us as bodhisattvas, and by the way, whether you like it or not, you're a bodhisattva, right? The Buddha woke up under the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago. The Buddha of our time, Shakyamuni Buddha, Siddhartha, sat still, woke up and said, I, together with the great earth and all beings at this moment, awaken. So we're in that with him, right? We're all beings of awakening, just like we're beings of carbon and blood and guts and tears and grass roofs. We're all beings of awakening. That's what the word bodhisattva literally means, a being of awakening. That's what we are. We're all beings of awakening. And I want to say to all of us, bodhisattvas, the world needs us to bring our A game right now, right? It's a crazy, crazy world. I feel like I'm saying this all the time these days. We got to bring our A game. We got to do everything we have in our lives to do, even though we don't know what the heck we're doing most of the time. Or is that just me? I don't know. We got to bring our A game. And, I was reminded, I've been teaching this class on the paramitas, and I'll say a little bit more about them in a minute. But and I was reminded last week, because we were teaching and talking together on election night. And as I was teaching, I had no idea what was going to happen and mostly expected the worst. And then it's like, oh, it's not so bad, right? But we got to watch that up and down, right? Like, oh, we're winning. No, we're losing. No, we're winning. No, wait, who's winning? Who's losing? Right? So it was election night. And I was thinking about 60 years ago, more or less, when Martin Luther King Jr. was speaking at Oberlin College right before the Voting Rights Act had become law. And he used, it wasn't the only place he used this phrase, but he used a phrase that became very famous. He said, he was trying to give the students at Oberlin heart, because they too, bodhisattvas, right? Take heart, take courage, take solace. He said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. That arc is this circumambulation that I'm talking about. It's the arc of a bodhisattva's life. And I want to encourage all of us to take heart in this arc today. Okay, let me take a sip of water and then talk about starving tigresses. Okay, so there are these folk tales, really, these Jataka tales. We've been talking about them in the Paramitas class. They're tales about the Buddha before he was the Buddha, all those kalpas of lifetimes when, his Buddha-ness, his Buddha to become-ness, his bodhisattva-ness was transmigrating from life to life, human to animal to everything in between. And these stories often are stories to illustrate what it is. I mean, they're all stories to illustrate what it is to be on the bodhisattva path, what it is to circumambulate, what it is to live that long arc bending toward love and kindness and justice. Probably the most famous of the Jataka tales in some collections, some famous collections, it's actually the first tale, is this tale about Prince Sattva, Prince being, like Bodhisattva, Prince Sattva. And he was the son of King Maharaja. And he lived kalpas and kalpas and kalpas before Shakyamuni Buddha was born. And he decided, like Shakyamuni would decide, like Gautama would decide, he decided to become an ascetic. And he practiced assiduously in the mountains. And one day he and his chief disciple were up on a cliffside. And they noticed down below this really emaciated, howling tigress. They knew it was a tigress because they could see she had teats and the teats were dry, and they could see her cubs all lined up around her. They were starving too. She was completely skin and bones, and she was howling. And Prince Sattva and his disciple were just stricken with compassion for this starving tigress way down in the valley below. And they're thinking, if she doesn't get any food, she's starting to lick her chops, looking at her cubs. She's going to eat her cubs, and that would be horrible. So their hearts are kind of breaking for this tigress, and also for her cubs, right, who are coming to mama. And mama's looking at them like dinner time, right? So Prince Sattva says to his disciple, go find something to feed this tigress, because if we don't do anything before she dies, she's going to eat her cubs, and that would be truly terrible. So his disciple runs off in search of food, and Prince Sattva is standing there pondering the fate of this tigress. And when he finally realizes, it's like, well, I could wait and get, until the disciple comes back and brings food, but there may not be food. And if there is food, it's just going to be another innocent animal who I'm going to sacrifice to the tigress. I've made a vow save all beings. Why not start right here and now? And so he takes off his robes and he leaps over the edge of the cliff. His body is crushed. And the tigress eats the body and survives. The disciple comes back and it's like, oh, wow, that was a big thing. So, this is a story that is used, it's been told many, many times. And one of the people who tells it very well nowadays is Rafe Martin, who's a Zen teacher who uses Jataka tales in his teaching a lot. And this is a pretty wonderful book, The Endless Path, that has a bunch of Jataka tales that are used to teach the perfections of bodhisattva life, the perfections of generosity and steadfastness and courage. So it's a story that's been told many times as an example of generosity, of this generosity that recognizes the needs of the world. And it's a story that often gets read as demonstrating this perfection of generosity in terms of the recognition that, life eats life. We're all of us, in the end, meet, right? We're all of us interconnected. We're all of us deeply joined, nothing but joined. And so the bodhisattva, in his guise as Prince Sattva, this is the classic reading of this tale, he knows something that's true about all of us. And just like our ancestor Dogen says about generosity, Dogen says, hey, just because what you think you own, you don't actually own, just because none of us literally owns anything, that doesn't keep you from giving a gift. Just because nothing you have is actually yours doesn't mean you can't give. And in fact, with the bodhisattva in this tale, what he realizes is, and again, this is a classic reading, what he realizes is nothing is mine. Here you go, tigress. And so there's this irony here in this story, which is, if nothing's mine, then actually I am able to give a real gift. Does that make sense? To recognize that it's all already yours, and yours, and yours, and yours. And so I can consciously do something that life is always doing, which is feeding other life. I can do what the little bunny rabbit that I might feed to the hungry tigress wouldn't be able to do. I can consciously recognize our interpenetration. That's the perfection of generosity. So, nice story, right? When the disciple comes back, you guys with me? When the disciple comes back and sees his master's robes, he goes down with the other monks to the bottom of the cliff after the tigers left, and he gathers up the bones. And they make a stupa. They create a relic, hut, a stupa, like a little bit like what's standing out there, right? That Kogan carved for us. They make one of those temples that covers sacred relics. Stupas within our tradition are, do you know what you do with stupas? Can you guess? You circumambulate them. You can actually find this stupa, the stupa that is said to contain the bones of the bodhisattva as Prince Sattva. You can literally find, pictures on the internet exist. It's in northern Pakistan. It's called the Mankiala Stupa. You can actually circumambulate where the bodhisattva gave himself to a hungry tigress. Pretty cool. That's how ritual works, folks. We can walk around that perfection. So I was thinking about circumambulation. I was thinking, why do we circumambulate? What is that? Right? So, circumambulation, scholars of religion and myth will tell us that circumambulation is fundamentally in its origins within human cultures. It's about, and this makes total sense when you think about it, it's at its origins, it's a solar charm. When we circumambulate, we are repeating the path of the sun from east to south, right, to west. Does that make sense? When we circumambulate, we circumambulate clockwise, right? In the northern hemisphere, why do we think clockwise is about doing it from your perspective? Why do we think that's what clockwise is? Does anyone know? sundials, right? You guys know what a sundial is? It marks the movement of time by the passage of the sun. Guess what clocks, well, not my iPhone watch, but guess what analog clocks are repeating with the movement of the dial? They were repeating the movement of the sun. Now, if clocks had been invented in Australia, counterclockwise would be clockwise. But that's for another Dharma talk. So circumambulation in all of these world cultures is about a solar charm. It's like, hey, life needs the sun. It needs the sun to rise up every morning to make its circuit for life to flourish. So if we want to protect anything, if we want to invoke goodness and propitious outcomes, if we want to protect ourselves and our crops and our families and our world, we're going to walk clockwise around things. That's the origin of circumambulation. Yeah, y'all with me? Now, I had a big Jewish wedding. I'm what sometimes people fondly call a Jew-boo, okay? I had a big Jewish wedding. In Jewish Ashkenazi traditions, the bride, the Kala, comes out. Does anyone know what she does when she first comes out and she meets her groom? She walks around him 7 times clockwise. Now, if you're a good progressive Jew-boo, you're like, I'm only going to walk around 3 times, and you have to walk around me 3 times, and then we'll walk together 1 time. But no, my husband and I did 7 times. So, there's lots of ways in which the rabbis and the communities reread this tradition, and they make it like, you do 3, I do 3, we do 1 together, and this is symbolizing our union. BS. The origin of that ritual is you walk around your future husband 7 times to actually make sure he never strays. Keep that energy inside the circle. Okay? This is this is archetypal human culture. Do that solar charm to keep the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. Right? Magic circles, just when you start to think about circumambulation, you realize it's everywhere. People are always doing this, right? And we do this in Zen ritual too, all the time. When Jukai happens and the disciples walk around the Jukai ordinees, we circumambulate them. New Buddhas are here. Good outcomes, good lives. Go forth. Be beautiful bodhisattvas, right? We circumambulate in Fusatsu, spreading the wisdom water across the room. We circumambulated in the Osagaki ceremony. Circumambulation is huge. Now, it starts in this solar charm kind of way, but how does it get tied to worship? Why would you circumambulate a stupa? So, one religious scholar that I read told the story going back to the Vedic scriptures, so South Asian Hindu culture, story about the vying between the gods Vishnu and Brahma. And they're like, I'm better than you are. No, I'm best. No, I'm best. No, I'm best. And Shiva says, okay, I'm going to decide this battle once and for all. And Shiva kind of emanates forth as a giant lingam, huge pillar, huge phallus, infinitely big, illuminated with light. And the challenge Shiva makes to Brahma and Vishnu and says, okay, you guys figure out just how big is my lingam, okay? How big is this infinite pillar, right? So Vishnu goes down, 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 down to the center of the earth, looking for the bottom of this. And then Brahma goes up, 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 up into the sky, looking for the height of this. And it's infinitely vast. Both of them give up. They come back, and Shiva says, aha, I am sovereign. And then what do Brahma and Vishnu do? They circumambulate the lingam. So what this scholar says is, how does circumambulation move from being a solar charm to an act of veneration? It's because we humans, or gods if you're talking about Brahma and Vishnu, but we finite created beings, the only way we can comprehend the infinite is to walk around it, to have it be the center around which we rotate, around which we navigate our lives. Trying to see every angle, but the one thing we can't see is the view from the center. We can't see in all directions because we are finite, we are physical, we are partial. So we circumambulate as a way of holding fast to that which is beyond what can be held. A circle is the only way we can comprehend the infinite. So let's come back to the hungry tigress. So, I shared that story in the context of teaching about the perfections, the paramitas. These are the qualities of a bodhisattva life. They are often called bases for training, sort of techniques for training ourselves to awaken. But the thing about these qualities like generosity or ethical conduct or discipline, patience or constancy, effort, vigor, concentration, wisdom. The thing about these perfections, they're like the precepts in that they're not just the techniques that lead us to awakening, they're actually the qualities of awakening. So we're practicing the heart of awakening. Now, if we come back to the story of Prince Sattva, why did he save the tigress? So the discussion of that I gave a moment ago, he saved the tigress. It was perfecting, practicing generosity, realizing this truth of our interconnection, practicing the truth, deeply practicing the truth that we're all meat, we're all life, we're all part of it. Nothing belongs to me that doesn't also belong to you and to everything. So he is practicing the spirit of generosity. That's a true reading, but that takes the story from the standpoint of Prince Sattva. I want to take this story from the standpoint of love. After all, Prince Sattva wasn't just trying to save a life. He was trying to save the tigress's soul. Like, what's worse than her dying? What's worse is that she would eat her children. And that's not terrible just because the children die. That's more terrible because of what happens to her bodhisattva heart. So in the horror that Prince Sattva and his disciple felt at seeing the tigress, it wasn't just, oh, there's a suffering animal. It was, oh, there's a suffering animal. It was that horror we feel when we touch our own already wise and awakened heart. Does this make sense? We touch it in ourselves because we see it in the other. We're horrified by war, not just because people die in war. We're horrified by war because people become cruel animals in war. We're horrified by injustice, not just because bad stuff happens. We're horrified by injustice because humans become inhuman when they perpetrate injustice. We're horrified by all the ways in which that wise, awakened heart, not just in me, but in others, is challenged and threatened. So in these moments, it's not just, am I practicing being a good bodhisattva? It's like, oh my gosh, there's the heart. There it is. Right? Does this make sense? The tender heart in all of us. So saving the tigress, this was an act of love. And what I want to say, and this is kind of the core of it, is that the path of love is not a direct path. In our delusion, we always think, like, when we're trying to figure out, well, what is love? And love is not a very Zen sounding word. So, like, I'm not being direct. I'm being a bad Zen student that way. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about love. I'm being a bad Zen student that way. Maybe I'm not being such a bad Zen student. But, that we talk about love, we think of, I don't know, I always think about love. I love love, right? In my delusion, though, I think love is something about an other. Like, I love this person. I love this being. I love this thing. I love nachos, right? Or I think that love is something like, it's my love. Like, I love nachos. Or I get all misty-eyed and goopy-eyed and I'm like, love, with a capital L and lots of hearts, right? I draw lots of hearts. I get all sentimental. And I think of love as some, like, I don't know, thing out there. Like, maybe it's God. It's up on a throne somewhere. or on a giant pillar, who knows, right? I think of it up there, somewhere out there. Or I get like vague and I think love is all around. Well, love is nothing more or less than the expression of the wise, kind heart, right? It's just that heart in action at the center of all of our activity. At the risk of using another old poem, I want to quote, this is now not a Chinese poem, this is an English poem. I want to quote early 18th century poet John Donne from a poem that he wrote to his wife called The Valediction Forbidding Mourning. And he was writing this to his wife, Anne Moore, who he really loved. He loved her very much. They had many babies. They were very happy. He was separating from her, and he wrote this poem saying, don't be sad. Basically, it's a poem saying, don't be sad. Don't be sad that I'm leaving. And it ends with this really famous image. He says, he was basically saying, don't be sad, I'm leaving, but we're not really separate. We're not really two, even though I'm leaving you. He says, our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion, like gold to airy thinness beat. So it's like our two souls are like, they're connected. So when you pull them up, it's like they're just stretching gold to a fine wire. And then he says, no, let me give you, he says, I got a better metaphor than that. He says, if they be two, they are two so as stiff twin compasses are two. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth if the other do. And though it in the center sit, and yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it and grows erect as that comes home. There's a little bit of a phallic pun in there. We won't talk about that right now. He says to her, such wilt thou be to me, who must like the other foot obliquely run. Thy firmness makes my circle just. It makes me end where I begun. Okay, it's 17th century poetry. So let me just give you the visual picture. Compasses, right? Did you ever use them to draw circles? The kind that have a fixed side here and then a hinge that connects to the pencil point. You guys know what I'm talking about? And you can hold one side firm and then make the other side go in a perfect circle. He's like, that's us. We're connected. So where's love in this? Love is the compass itself, is the hinge, right? That holds us together. But it's a hinge that we can't see. Right? It's the center that we can't see. It keeps us in connection. It keeps us circumambulating in a steadfast path around each other, around our whole world. And so I encourage us, all of us, in times that may feel divided, whether we feel like the good guys are winning or the bad guys are winning or nobody's winning, we're all losing. When the stakes feel impossibly high, and like Lords Brahma and Vishnu, we can't get to the bottom, we can't overleap, I encourage us all to ask yourself where you feel touched, where you feel moved, horrified, gladdened, where you feel the bodhisattva heart of even the most hungry and starving and scary tigress. Move from that place where you feel moved. The path will not be direct, and it often won't be obvious. But as you anchor yourself in that place where you feel moved, what you will come to know, I am certain of this, what you will come to know is your own tender heart better and better. And in knowing your own tender heart, you will know the tender heart, the wise and awakened heart that holds us all. So I'm sure we have time for a question or two or comment.
Yeah, I'm thinking of when Vishnu and Brahma tried to seek out the top and the bottom of things together, and then they circumambulated together.
Mm.
Isn't that kind of a huge part of the story
Oh, that's beautiful.
about that honoring?
That's beautiful.
Is that?
Yeah, what do you think?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless we
Yeah.
circumambulate together. That's
Yeah.
that community that.
I mean, it's really nice to be in community, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we are always in community. Sometimes we know it and sometimes we don't. But yeah, that is the beautiful part of that story, that what starts out as rivalry becomes this fellowship around a sacred center. But even when you don't feel the warmth of community around you, you know, take heart that something is hinging you to your own sense of hurt or love, joy or sorrow, your own heart. Something is hinging you together.
This might not make complete sense, but if the bodhisattva, or I guess it was Shakyamuni Buddha, kalpas ago, what about the thought that he could do more good than kill himself?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this in the Paramita's class. It's like those moments where the calculus falls away, you know? So, you know, Sai's asking, you know, like he kills himself, he gives up his life, like, you know, for a tiger. This does not compute, right? There's so much good he could have done. But in that moment, right, what he felt so powerfully is being moved by that sense of the tender, loving heart that is there in the tigress and there in himself. So, I mean, I think that's not that calculus isn't bad, not that it's not reasonable to weigh the pros and cons of our actions,